So, hello, everybody. Hello, thanks for joining me this evening. This evening, I am looking at the concept of neuroplasticity and rewiring your brain. This follows a video that I'd put out last week. I'd asked if anyone was interested in learning about things like neuroplasticity, rewiring your brain for things like resilience, confidence, things like that. Seemed to get somebody at the door there, seemed to get a positive response from that. So I thought I would do that live. I think there'd be easier to do it a bit live. Looking at that, maybe take some questions as well. Okay, so what do I mean by rewiring your brain? Well, first of all, looking at the concept of neuroplasticity, sometimes known as brain plasticity. And this refers to our brain's ability to be able to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections and pathways. Sounds a bit scientific. I'm not really a scientific kind of person. I'm going to keep this very, very brief and general. But these new experiences help us to reorganize different pathways in our brain. These new pathways allow us to be able to adapt to new experiences. We can learn skills. We can recover from different things, abuse, anxiety, stress, traumatic events, and so on, and help us to respond to different kind of changes in our lives, environmental changes, lifestyle changes, and so on. So it's really looking at the different stimulations in our lives, but also looking at things like our lifestyle. But most importantly, I think it's looking at the repetition of behaviors, not just behaviors, the things we do day to day, but sometimes our thinking habits and things like that. And it's just come into my mind, if you think about it, how our brain kind of continues to adapt and change throughout our lives anyway. For instance, we get a new car. So we have to learn how to drive the car. We can drive a car, but we have to learn the little subtle differences and so on from maybe the previous car. Or we get a new job, so we have to learn maybe a new way of doing something. So we adapt and change throughout our lives. But a lot of people may have had very negative experiences in their lives. Okay, they may have been in, a lot of people been on my channel. They've been in things like coercive relationships, abusive relationships, and things like that. They've been in situations that have been very anxiety provoking, stress provoking. Sorry about this. Damn this hay fever. Hold on. And in a long-term environment or situation or relationship where you might have found yourself always being hyper vigilant, always being on the lookout for sudden mood changes, you're not quite sure how someone is going to react to you. Are they going to be pleased for you? Are they going to criticize you? Everything you ever did, you felt like you were at fault. Over a long period of time, those experiences might have created pathways where being in a state of hyper alert was normalized. Okay. So, and that can leak out into other areas that can, even long after you're out of that environment, that horrible job or that relationship or whatever it was, a lot of the time that can stay with you because it's like it's become a well-worn path. Okay. It's become very familiar to us. And the negative experiences can lead to unhelpful thinking habits, things like catastrophizing, jumping to conclusions, mind reading, predicting the future, things like that. It can also lead to things like avoidant behaviors. And what happens is those things can actually reinforce those pathways. Okay. The same can actually be said for positive experiences, positive behaviors as well. The example that I heard used once, and I hope I don't ruin it. I hope you get the point. But the example I heard used once was, it's like if you're treading on a path, you're walking on a path, maybe in a forest or a field or something, and it's a well-worn path. Okay, in order to maybe go off that path, maybe find a new path, a more direct path, or a path that's going to lead you to a different destination, it's going to require having to continually walk that route before a path begins to form. Our brain is the same. We were in a situation or an environment where there was a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, so we've become hardwired to deal with things like stressful situations, rejection, conflict, and things like that. In order to rewire our brain, it requires, well, first of all, it requires intent. It requires us to start to practice new things. So, what the neuroplasticity allows us to do is to become a bit more adaptable. We don't have to be so rigid in how we're seeing things and how we're thinking about things. And to be adaptable, that allows us to deal with different challenges and to deal with different situations, different people, and different relationships. It helps us to build confidence. It also helps us to build resilience. And resilience isn't just our ability to bounce back from obstacles and negative experiences. It's also our ability to be able to navigate through and round different problems. Okay. It also helps with our learning and our memory because we do learn from experiences. Okay. What we can learn is we can learn from what works every bit as well as we learn from what doesn't work, not just what to avoid, but what can help improve situations. And when we do that, we can improve our problem solving abilities. We can think through things, maybe objectively sometimes. We can think of maybe the best outcome that we would want, the outcome we would prefer, as opposed to maybe the path of least resistance, the avoidance, the trying to avoid any kind of hardship, difficulty, rejection, or whatever. So, yeah, it helps us with our problem solving abilities as well, which can in turn help boost our confidence, okay? Our self confidence, the faith that we have in ourselves, okay? When we start to practice new things and try new things, it can help us to overcome negative patterns, okay? We can learn better coping skills. Now, what I say about coping skills is I've nothing against coping skills. Coping skills are pretty good. God knows I use tons of them myself sometimes. But sometimes what you might find is if you stop doing the things that hold you back, if you stop doing the things that are hurting you, the things that maybe sabotage certain things in your life, when you stop doing those things, you don't need a coping strategy. Okay. But other times you might want to learn different coping strategies, ways to deal with certain situations. And what you can learn is the coping strategy isn't there to take away the anxiety or the distress or whatever, but what it does is it helps reduce it. Okay. So it doesn't become so overwhelming. It becomes a lot more manageable. And those emotions, those feelings are there to maybe inform us rather than make decisions for us. Okay. So we learn to be able to respond and adapt to stressful situations a lot better. And lastly, when it comes to something like maybe recovery or healing from something, whether that's been in an abusive relationship, whether that was in a very stress inducing environment, whether it was an addiction, whatever it was, it can also give us hope. Okay, because a lot of people, whenever they feel they're in a lot of pain, they've experienced a lot of stuff. And they might be thinking, they've struggled for so long. They might be thinking, well, this is just my life. This is my life now. Not necessarily. Whenever we start to pay attention to the little small things we do in our own best interest to help us to move forward, that helps to build the incentive and the motivation, and it starts to give us hope because the future looks a lot brighter. All of a sudden, it starts to look a lot brighter than the past did. We don't have to stay in that place, not forever. So, different ways to help tap into that neuroplasticity and start to rewire it, even in just different ways. It does involve, I mentioned a moment ago, incentive. We have to have an incentive, okay? And it involves deliberately repeating things, not just trying something once to see how it goes. It didn't work, so I'm not going to do it again. Or it worked quite well, so therefore I don't have to do it anymore. That's me fixed. No, it's a repeated pattern. Just like the situation you were in, hardwired you to be constantly on alert. That wasn't just a one-off. Okay, what you might have found was that was a series of little minor rejections, criticisms, and things like that. It was an ongoing pattern of things. That's what rewired your brain to be constantly anxious. This time round, you're doing it, and you're doing it with intent. Okay, you're doing it with a motivation. You have an aim. So when you decide to do whatever it is you're doing, it's about repeating that behavior. And that could even be challenging your negative thoughts. That could be learning to regulate your emotions and so on. That could be doing things for your own pleasure, your own interest, things that are going to help you to build positive neural pathways, just like trying to build that new path. When we do that, when we start to do something with intent, if this was cognitive behavioral therapy, I would be saying this is what's known as behavioral activation. Okay, we start to do something and we start to engage in that new activity with intent. Because this is a thing about our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors, they are all linked. When we start to look at addressing how we feel about something, or how we think about something, or how we behave towards something, just one small change in one of those areas, being consistent and over a long period of time, you will, when I say a long period of time, I don't mean forever, but over a period of time, what you'll begin to see is a knock-on effect in the other two areas. So in CBT terms, this would be known as behavioral activation. You focus on the behavior. What do you want to do? What is it you need to do? What is it you think would be helpful? When you start to engage in that new behavior, this is going to start to weaken the old unhelpful connections that you had. Things like the avoidance, the fear-based avoidance, the negative self-talk, things like nothing ever works out for me, or no one cares, and if I try this, sure, it's only going to fail, and I don't deserve, etc., etc. You're starting to wear down those connections. Whenever you start to do something and you're starting to see the benefit, you feel the benefit. When you start to do that, what you start to recognize is the new pathways start to form. It starts to become a bit more normalized, and you have evidence against some of the stuff that you'd been experienced previously. Okay, some of those old pathways that we thought were fact. Okay, I would like to say as well that neuroplasticity usually, not say usually, but a lot of people would associate this with young people, like children, because they're constantly learning. They learn stuff every day, which kind of suggests that you might get to a certain age and you can't learn anything new. It's like that old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That's not true. We can learn new things at any age. A lot of people who maybe go retire, whenever they retire, they might want to start to learn a new instrument. They might want to learn new skills. They might want to learn different languages and things like that. So the neuroplasticity is there at any age, I believe. So I just thought I'd throw that in, by the way. So age isn't really a limit. What it does take, though, is consistent effort. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you some tips, some ideas to help to rewire your brain. Okay. Everybody's going to be different. What it is you want to do might be different. There's different ways that you do. So I'm not going to give you anything specific. I'm not going to tell you to go and learn a musical instrument or something. But I'm going to be very general on some of the things you can do. And one of them can be, begin by just practicing a little bit of positive self-talk, okay? And just positive affirmations. Things like, no matter what I do, it never works out. I always fail, okay? That's, if you think of unhelpful thinking habits, that's what would be known as generalizing, okay? It's always this, it's never that. Even when things do go wrong, we can tell ourselves, I can learn from this, okay? The fact that maybe something didn't work out doesn't necessarily mean I failed. It doesn't make me a failure, okay? Failing doesn't make you a failure any more than going to a garage makes you a car, okay? Or going to a church makes you religious or something. We learn from things like that. We can learn things like I have learned, or we can say things like I have learned from that. I'm going to build on what I've learned. I'm going to try it differently next time. Okay. And when we repeat those affirmations every time that sort of like negative talk comes into our head, yeah, we now have something to challenge it with. Even said that, even challenging that negative talk. I remember another therapist sharing with me one time. I thought this was interesting. That negative thought we have, that negative voice we have, that inner critic we have that's always telling us nothing ever works out for us, we're no good at anything. If you were to think of it like a parrot, okay? Parrot has no idea what it's saying. It's just making noises, okay? Every time you walk into the room, the parrot squawks at you, you're a loser, you're an idiot, whatever. The last thing you're going to do is try to sit down and reason with a parrot, okay? You recognize all it is are sounds, things that we have picked up. Sometimes it's not even our voice, okay? It's someone else's that is still on repeat in our head. Maybe it's just about getting yourself a new bird and teaching it something new to say, okay? So it's repeating positive affirmations, things like, I will try. I'm good enough to try. I'm brave enough to try. This is what I would like to do. This is what I would hope to do. Things like that, positive affirmations. What did I learn today? If you find it helpful, you could just write out a series of sentences and things that you want to complete at the end of the day, maybe in your journal. Things like, today I learned. Today I helped. Today I felt good about. Just little things like that, because sometimes we miss those things and we're looking at everything that went wrong. So it's a good way of getting a bit of balance, and repeat those things daily. Okay. Again, it's about getting into that habit, getting into that routine, build a routine around it. Okay. When we start to do things like it can help us to build our confidence. It does reduce the self-doubt. We don't think we're suddenly a Marvel superhero or whatever, but we start to see things in a more balanced way. And the more confident we become, what you might find is your resilience starts to grow as well. You don't look at something as a problem, as an obstacle. Rather, you might look at it as a step you have to take, or something you have to navigate around. Okay. So again, it can help with your problem solving abilities. Okay. Something else that can be useful to rewire our brain are doing things like physical exercise. Okay. Now, if you're like me, I haven't been in a gym since I was a teenager, and it probably shows. But a lot of people like the gym, find the gym good. People might want to go to the gym. Other people, they just might want to go running. They might want to take up cycling. Some people might just want to go for a walk, whatever it is. But one way or another, just things like walking, it could be yoga even, could be the gym, could be whatever it is, going for a swim. Little things like that can be good, because what you're doing with exercise is you're burning off excess energy that you don't want, which can help reduce stress. Okay. And sometimes without the excess energy that we have when we're feeling very anxious and very stressed, sometimes it's easier to think something through. It can also, the exercise can also help us. It starts to create that normal happy drug that we create naturally in our head, things like dopamine, serotonin, things like that. Especially if it's like when I take Freud out for a walk. I live quite a rural kind of place. And when I take him out, there's a lot of fields and countryside and things like that. And he goes off for a run. I'll throw a ball a couple of times, or I'll let him go do what he wants, stick his nose in a bush or whatever it is he gets up to. I don't like it when he rolls about in a field. I don't know what that's about, but he rolls about in the grass sometimes. I don't know, strange critter. In the good weather, not so much in the cold weather, because it's always bloody freezing and I'm not good in the cold. But in the nice weather and the warm weather, even just in dry weather, it's nice because there is something about the countryside, I think, being close to nature and things like that can lift your mood, can help ease things a lot. A lot of people say that. I mean, I know I find it, but I think a lot of people find things like the countryside nice and relaxing. So anyway, there's me waffling again. Yeah, things like even just a walk in the country, a walk in the park for maybe 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, whatever it is you want to do. Okay. Some kind of physical activity. Okay. Something else, moving on, something else you might want to do is practice, learn new skills. Okay. I mentioned a moment ago, it could be learning a new language. It could be learning to play a musical instrument. It could be like this evening before I went live, I am on a different platform. I'm still on YouTube, as you can see, but there's a thing called StreamYard, which is supposed to make live streaming easier. I had to mess about with that to try to figure out how it works. So I don't know how this is coming across. I hope you can see me and hear me okay. Otherwise, I'm just talking to myself. I'm not good with technology. I grew up in the analog age and I still think in analog terms. But I know I have to learn these things, okay? And the more I practice, the more I'm hopefully going to get better at it. So we do learn new things all the time. We learn new skills. We learn, we might pick up a new hobby. We might want to do a course in something. You know, we don't always have to want to enroll to become a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon. It could be something simple. Something that's been on my mind for a long time is to learn just even simple DIY tricks. I'm not good with my hands at all. I'm probably the only Magee in the family that couldn't bang a nail into a wall, but you know, might want to learn something new like that. We learn new things. Even little things like little challenges, what's the word, puzzles, things like that, little puzzles, word puzzles, things like that. We might want to engage in things like that, things that engage our brain, things that challenge us, things we have to figure out. If you're into games, if you play games, you might want to move from one kind of game to maybe a strategy kind of game, things you have to think maybe a step or two ahead. You know, start to play chess, you know, whatever it is, things that encourage you to think about something and to focus on what you're thinking about. And over time, this is, again, it's going to increase confidence in your learning abilities. Even if you don't pick it up straight away, that's perfectly all right. Who said there was a time limit? Okay. But it will help build confidence in your ability to work things out. Your problem solving skills, it'll help you with your confidence, your resilience and things like that. Because what you're doing when you engage in something new is you're embracing change, okay? You're challenging yourself, but you're embracing the challenge. And if you fail, if you lose a game, if you don't get number 4 across in the crossword, whatever, what have you really lost, okay? Most we're going to do is go, oh, right, there you go, whenever we get the answers. It's not that big a deal. So it can also be a bit of fun, okay? Next can be practicing things like mindfulness, meditation, things like that. Whenever we do that, we're experiencing things in the moment, what we're thinking, what we're feeling. A lot of people, when they practice mindfulness, just out of interest, do you know what I used to call mindfulness before it was called mindfulness? And this is even before I was a therapist. I used to call it just paying attention. Okay, all we're doing is paying attention. When we're engaging in mindfulness, we're paying attention to what we're thinking and what we're feeling. And there are exercises out there where, as we're doing that, we're doing it, but we're doing it without judging it. We're just noticing it. Okay. Personally, I think as a human being, we cannot help but judge certain things. It's perfectly okay to recognize as something being warm or cold or comfortable or whatever, you know, it's okay to notice those things. But it really depends on what level of mindfulness, I guess. There are different apps you can get for your phone. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. There's podcasts. There's stuff you can download. I always say it's about finding something that works for you. Okay. Something else, I suppose it is linked a bit to the mindfulness, would be our metacognition, okay? And this is when we start to think about thinking, okay? And that will involve things like maybe self-reflection, okay? What was going on with me? What was I thinking at the time? Why would I have been thinking that? What feelings were coming up for me? What is it I believe? Why do I believe it? Where's the evidence for it? Or is there any evidence against it? Things like that. So that can be useful as well, engaging in our metacognition. And something you might find useful with that is journaling. Okay. Because sometimes it's in our head and we can't really make sense of it. But whenever we write something down, we can go back, we can look at it, we can analyze it, we can ask some of those questions. We can, even with hindsight, we could look at what was I feeling at the time. You could put yourself on a scale at that time. I was, 0. I was calm. I just eaten a big bowl of lavender. 10, I was at my wit's end. And in that moment, I was an 8. So that's quite high. And again, with a little bit of reflection, looking back at that, what you might realize is the 8 was probably normal, given whatever the situation was, but it passed very quickly. Okay. It might have only lasted 2 minutes, might have lasted 5 minutes, might have lasted whatever. Other times you might recognize it was more like maybe a 3 out of 10. But because I feel so uncomfortable with the feeling, because I'm fearing the feeling, it might as well have been a 10. Okay. So little things like the journaling can help with that. It can help with the emotional regulation. It can also help us to challenge some of the thinking habits, what we were thinking at the time. Okay. Was I mind reading? Was I predicting the future? Was I catastrophizing? Was I generalizing? Whatever it happened to be. Okay. And you can, I wouldn't say prove yourself wrong, but what you could do is you could try to maybe look at a way to think about it in a more balanced way, particularly with hindsight. And again, the more you start to do those things, the more you start to analyze some of your habits, you're starting to build new neural pathways. Okay. You could even be looking in your journal at how did you behave at that time? Did what you do help it? Did it just avoid it? Or did it make it worse? Okay. I always say if you're journaling, it is your own handwritten evidence. Okay. So something else that can be useful, and again, it can help with not just a positive mindset. I like to say a balanced mindset. Um, is sometimes showing a little bit of gratitude for something. We can be grateful that we might have failed at something, it didn't work out, but it wasn't the disaster that we feared. And again, maybe we learned something from it. Or maybe it didn't work out for us, but with hindsight, we realize it's probably a good idea it didn't work out because it's not really the direction I wanted to take. Okay. We can be grateful for, we don't have to be grateful for, we've got millions in the bank and we've got a fridge with food packed into it and so on. It's not that we're massively affluent and all the rest of it. But we can be grateful that today is a new day. We can be grateful that there are resources out there. We can be grateful if you're seeing a therapist. We could be grateful that we have a therapist, that we have friends, that we have a support group, that we have a support network. Again, we might not necessarily be skipping and jumping with happiness and everything is absolutely wonderful. But there are always small things. We could be grateful that we had a dinner tonight. We could be grateful that we had a restful night's sleep. Okay. Lots of different things that we can be grateful for. Which kind of leads me on to the next one, because I mentioned sleep there. Sleep, rest, and sleep can be important as well. Anxiety is one of those things where people can find it hard to get to sleep. Ruminating thoughts, catastrophizing thoughts, and so on. So they can find it hard to get to sleep. Sometimes there can be broken sleep. They wake several times during the night. Sometimes people can be very stressed. Maybe they do sleep, but when they get up in the morning, they feel as tired as they did when they went to bed. So looking at ways to maybe get a good night's rest can be useful as well. And again, there are different guided meditations and things on YouTube if you want to have a look at those. Again, there's podcasts. There's different things you can do to help with your sleep hygiene, I believe it's called. You might make a deal with yourself. You're not going to be looking at your phone after 7 o'clock. You're not going to be looking at computer screens, things like that. You're going to read a book instead. You're going to talk to someone. That could be, I think it's called blue light, if I'm right. And if someone can correct me if I have this wrong, if someone can tell me I think it's called blue light. The blue light that you get from screens can sometimes affect your sleep. It could be cutting out caffeine after a certain time of day. But even finding different little ways. I'm not an expert in sleep, but I have a colleague who's a therapist who does help people with sleep problems. And one of the things she told me once is it isn't always the amount of sleep, but it's the quality of the sleep. Ideally, we're aiming for about maybe 7 or 8 hours. But even if you're only getting 5 or 6 hours, as long as they are very restful, as long as you feel refreshed, it's a good place to start. So it's looking at maybe the quality of the sleep as well. Because when we get up in the morning, again, we feel a bit more refreshed, and this can help with the neuroplasticity. It can help us with our energy, and it can help us to face whatever it is we're going to deal with during the day because we've got better cognitive functioning and things like that. Okay. So things like our rest and our sleep can be important. If you're working, make sure you take breaks during the day. Okay. Take your lunch break, take your tea break, whatever it is. Take those little breaks. For many, many years, I used to just work continuously. Before I was a therapist, the last place I worked in, I would have been working continually. I was always trying to get as much done as I could. And I found myself, as a lot of people do, I found myself becoming irritable, becoming edgy. It was really because I was becoming burnt out, okay? My mood was lowering, things like that, and I hadn't the energy for even social interactions. It's just because I was tired, okay? And you see, when you're young, in your late 20s, early 30s, you still think you're indestructible. You still think you can do all these things, and you can't. You need to rest. You need to break. So the resting is important. It comes to things like your sleep and so on, but even taking those breaks during the day can be important, okay? Something else, and it's something I've said quite a lot, is if you have been in an environment or a situation with a very toxic, nasty person, the antidote to toxic people are decent people, okay? Try to build social connections, okay, with good people, with nice people. They don't have to be your best friend. They don't all have to be singing The Sound of Music, kind of songs. They don't have to be like Disney characters, but just good people. People that bring out the best in you. They'll laugh at your jokes. They'll support you. They will encourage you. People who will call you out if you're being wrong, but not in a horrible, nasty way. People that will celebrate in your success. People that you like encouraging and supporting as well. Try to make it a mutual thing. So try to build connection with good people, with decent people. Again, you don't have to be your best friends. It could be on a forum. It could be in a network. I always say be cautious about the ones you join because there are trolls and things like that out there, and there are people who just want to stay stuck and they don't like the thought of you getting better. So always try to make sure it's a good community. Maybe it's a well-moderated one. But then there's real life connection as well, okay? Going back to earlier on about learning something new, it could be joining a group. It could be a book club. It could be a hiking group. It could be the local history group. It could be anything, okay? Just try to form social connections. Anytime you feel like you're not up for it, remember, we fall into habits very easily. We might slip back into old habits. Start to challenge the avoidance, okay? You might genuinely not want to go because you've got a terrible cold or a flu or something, which is fair enough. Other times it's just that we're falling into old habits. One way of avoiding old habits or breaking a bad habit maybe is by trying to form a new one. Which is why I said things like you do something with intent, you start to form a routine around it. If you agree to be somewhere at something every Monday night at 7 o'clock, you build a routine around that and you go every single week. Okay. This is going to, I used this term in a previous live stream about updating your memory. This is a good way of updating those fear-based pathways, those fear of rejection, that fear, or rather that belief that the path of least resistance is the best path to take. I'm not in the mood, so I'm not going to bother going. When you push yourself, even if you're journaling and you're writing this down, what you might notice, if you're not in the mood to do something and you don't do it, you don't go, notice that you very rarely feel better for it. Okay. But when you do encourage yourself, and you do, I like this phrase I heard many years ago, when you dress up and you turn up. Okay. When you do that, notice you very rarely feel worse. More often than not, you might feel a bit better. You might be glad you went. Okay. So it is about trying to challenge some of those old routines that we got into. We can find it very easy to slip back. So that's something to maybe pay attention to. What you're also doing whenever you do encourage yourself is you find your comfort zone is starting to widen as well. I was going to say something there. I'm pretty sure I've said this before. Yeah, I have. I've said this many times. When we face things that we're uncomfortable with, what you might find is your comfort zone does start to widen. Your tolerance for distress starts to increase. So you start to become a bit more confident, a bit more courageous, but you also become a bit more resilient as well. Because you might be looking at going to that thing at 7 o'clock as being a hassle because maybe it's cold and wet and rainy outside. You're looking at the best way of doing that. Okay, do I take the car this evening, or will I take a cab, or will I get the bus, or will I just wear my heavy raincoat with an umbrella just to get there? Okay, you're improving again. You're building your resilience. You're tapping into your resilience, but you're also looking at your problem solving skills. You're not looking at the problem as some kind of insurmountable obstacle. You're looking at it more as something to overcome. Lastly, and this is, I think this can be quite useful, especially if we're so used to assuming the worst case scenarios. When you start to when you start to visualize and think about the outcome that you would prefer, what success would look like, how it would feel. Now, you're not necessarily engaging in a fantasy, but when you start to think of how it might, let's imagine it is learning to play a musical instrument. Okay, so you might never have a sellout concert at Wembley Stadium or something. Okay. But what would it feel like to be able to just lift out that instrument and play it? Whatever it is you want to play. Okay. You don't even have to have an audience. You're just doing it for your pleasure. Or to be able to talk to someone and tell them, yeah, I learned how to play this. Do you want to hear it? I'm not okay. I'm no Eric Clapton, but will you hear? To be able to do something like that. Okay, you visualize what it would look like, how that would feel. You want a better job. Maybe the job you're in isn't a good one and you've been stuck in it for a long time. When you start to visualize what a better job with a better salary would look like, okay? You'd be looking at your skills. You'd be looking at how could you update your CV. You might be looking at different things you might want to learn so that you could bring it to somewhere new. When you start to get an idea of what it is you would like, it is one way of being able to create those positive emotions, okay? And it can help those neural patterns, okay? Again, helps with resilience. It helps with confidence and things like that. It can help you to mentally rehearse for things like a job interview, to meet new people, go into a new work environment, whatever it is, which is very different from, I'm just using a work environment as an example. If you were in a work environment and you've been there for quite a while, and maybe the manager or the other staff, they're telling you you're no good at anything and you will never get a promotion and you don't deserve a pay rise, and no matter what you do, it's never enough. Again, sometimes that negativity starts to rewire our brain, where we, even if there's part of us really doesn't believe it, okay, we really don't believe it, we're just in that environment and it is creating such tension in us. We kind of feel we're helpless when we're not really. As I say, it's about updating our CV, learning new skills, putting yourself out there, doing whatever it is, okay? So when we start to visualize what it is we would like and we think about it in a positive way, then sometimes the question is, how do I get there from here? We're not living in a fantasy. We're not living some kind of delusion. What we're doing is we're trying to create a path through, or either away from where we are or towards something else, okay? So when you start to engage with intent and you continually repeat these things, you're taking an active role in reshaping your brain, okay? You're building those new neural pathways, okay? Every positive experience has the potential to rewire your brain every bit as much as those negative ones did, okay? Those examples where you might have been told again that you were no good at anything, you're too stupid, you shouldn't make decisions, you should come to me, and what are you thinking about that for? Sure, whatever. When you do it with intent and you start to get those positive experiences, the more you repeat them, the more you start to do them, I say, it starts to rewire your brain. You're taking control of it, okay? Things like the journaling can help because you can track your own progress. But as I always say, it's a lot easier to do this if you do this with maybe a therapist, maybe a life coach, because it might be something specific you're trying to learn, something you're trying to do. Someone who can help you, can maybe guide you, can encourage you, friends, family, things like that. So yeah, some kind of support. But the key thing is the consistency and the intent, okay? The more you do it, the more you learn. So I have just talked about neuroplasticity without knowing a damn thing about science. So I hope it made sense to you. I was trying to do it from a CBT behavioral kind of approach. So let me have a look. I'm going to go back. I'm going to have a look at any questions that were coming up. So hello on my way. Hello, psychic consultant. Hello, James. Hello, Adam. Hello, everybody. Where do we get to? Oh, Peterson, tinnitus is very tough to habituate. Some have faster results than most. I don't know much about that. I know it's, from what I gather, it's like a ringing in the ear. It's like a constant thing, I think. Or for some people, is it something that comes and goes? I don't know much about that. Sometimes when it comes to injury or life-changing situations, sometimes it can be, pardon me, there can be a lot of adjustment. It's something that I think a lot of people would benefit from if they're talking to someone who has expertise in that kind of area. There may be ways of managing it. It's not really my field. I don't know much about tinnitus, but from the people I know that have talked about it, that have it, people I know in my life, said it's a very irritating thing. It's constantly there. And Audrey says, God bless you. God bless us all. Hedge of protection around us. God binds the wounds of the brokenhearted. It's a very comforting thought. Thank you for that, Audrey. James says you never know how a narcissist will react. You might not know specifically, but you do know they are going to react. I always say that you always be careful with who you're dealing with, especially if it's a narcissistic person, because you don't quite know. you might have a sense of it, but you don't always know what someone is capable of. But whatever it is you do it with caution, and you always make sure you're safe. Where do we get to? Angela saying my ISAC, I'm not quite sure what that is, but anyway, discussed something similar during a counseling session. Oh, yeah. Well, counselors do tend to work with, especially if it's CBT. Well, not just CBT based. When people go to counseling, it is always about change. It's because something has to change. Something is hurting. Something's not working. Something is holding us back. And that could be a variety of things. It could be a situation we're in currently. We're not sure what path to take. It could be historical things that are impacting on today. But it is largely about change. And in one way or another, therapists do tend to work in different ways to help their client bring about some kind of change. And it's not just doing or saying something, okay? It is about maybe learning a new way of doing or saying something in order to be able to move forward. So where did we get to? Anyone has any questions, if you please put a question mark up, it's going to be easier for me to find. Okay, so where did we get to? What, why, and who says stay clear of toxic people, learn to enjoy alone time. Alone time is pretty good. I like alone time as well. Yeah, sometimes nothing wrong with just sitting on your, well, when I say alone, I've usually got Freud with me. Just reading a book, watch the movie, doesn't matter what it is. I like alone time. Why do you think I moved into the middle of nowhere? Okay. Where do we get to? Rochelle says I procrastinate, not sure why. Well, I can't tell you why, but I can tell you some of the common reasons. We will procrastinate for many different reasons. Sometimes it is the fear of failing. We fear people's ridicule, things like that. We fear consequences. Sometimes we procrastinate because we fear succeeding, because if we succeed at something, there's going to be a whole new level of expectation on us. Sometimes we fear succeeding because we're going to be met with, maybe certain people, we're going to be met with their envy and their scorn, okay? Because they don't want us to succeed. They would rather we just look at our feet and aim for the floor, okay? Sometimes we procrastinate because, well, if I put it this way, the difference between procrastinating and avoidance, I believe anyway, is when we avoid something, we're avoiding something we believe to be deeply unpleasant, okay? And there are some things that are in our best interest to avoid. When we procrastinate, we're not so much avoiding it because we actually want it, we need it, it could well be in our best interest, it is something we have to do. But what we're saying is not at the moment, okay? So what we're doing is we're delaying our gratification. And we could be doing that for a variety of reasons. We could be doing it because we want it, but we want it without the hassle. We want it without that fear of failing or success. We want it without the sacrifice. We want it without the mental energy or whatever it is it's going to take. There could be a lot of different reasons. Different ways to overcome procrastination. And I think it's again, it really depends on the situation and on the person. But an exercise you might find useful is whatever it is you need to do. And it could be anything. It could be even something as simple as replying to an email. It could be whatever it is. If you just get yourself a page and draw a line down the center of the page, on the left-hand side of the page, write down all the reasons why it's a hassle, why it's a problem, what the obstacles are, what the issues with it are, okay? Write them, be as creative as you want, write them all down on the left-hand side of the page. Once you've done that, just go and do the damn thing, okay? There's no silver bullet, I'm sorry. You go and you do it. And Even if you don't do it, even if it's a huge thing, what you do is you at least make a start to do it. Okay, you do that first step, whatever it is. After that, take that same page, and on the right-hand side of the page, write down what were the real problems. What were the real issues? What were the real obstacles? And again, it's your own handwritten evidence, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you, you're going to see two completely different lists. That, again, requires intent. Again, as I said earlier on, it's like behavioral activation. It's something you have to do with intent. But the more you do it, and the more you're recording it, the more you're seeing those things, again, the more you're rewiring your brain. You're finding the path of least resistance, and delayed gratification isn't getting you what you want. I often say the path of least resistance very rarely takes you where you want it to. More often than not, it leads you to more hardship and misery. Okay. It's just in that moment, it feels easier. It's not that it is easier, it just feels easier. So if you want to try that little exercise, depending on what it is you're procrastinating over, yeah, if you want to try something like that, okay, left-hand side of the page, all of the obstacles, all of the problems, then just do it. Then afterwards, write down what were the real problems, okay? So where do we get to? Give us other ideas other than go to a gym. Well, like I said earlier, it could be going for a walk. It could be taking your dog for a walk. It could be taking a trip to the coast and going for a walk. It could be whatever. It could be yoga. It could be going swimming. Whatever it is. I'm not an overly active person apart from dog walking. You find something that works for you. You find something that you enjoy doing. Okay. Find something that you get some kind of benefit from. Okay. Max says the stress of here's something. Here's something new. Yes, I can put people's questions and stuff up. Hello, Max. You're now the feature on my, you're now the feature on the channel here. Stress of last job was knowing I was being taken advantage of was killing me. Finally left and I'm healing. What you often find is when you're out of the environment or out of the situation, it can be easier to heal. It's very difficult to heal in an environment that is hurting you. Okay. I think the most we can do is learn how to manage it, learn how to manage ourselves. But again, it depends on the person, the individual, the situation, and so on. I'm not so sure it's always easy to heal while you're in the environment. So where do we get to? Okay. Sometimes cleaning and organizing one's home space is calming and healing for the brain. Why, what, and whose? Yes. Cleaning and organizing your home space. It can be. Yeah. The number of people that I've met over the years who would say whenever they're stressed, everybody knows when they're stressed. This friend of mine says that her husband knows when she's stressed because out comes the duster and the polish and the hoover and all the rest of it, and everything gets blitzed. There can be something in that. And I think that when we maybe arrange our living space, we have it the way we would like it. We clear away stuff that shouldn't be there. I mean, I've got a cup of coffee that's been there since Friday. I should really leave that cup downstairs. When we start to organize our space, our workspace, our home space, things like that, there can be something healing in that. Yeah, especially whenever we complete a task. Yeah. Where do we get to? Where do we get to? Hello, Jane Smith. You're out with the kids and you can't hear us, but that's okay. You can watch the playback again. It should record, and hopefully there'll be something in it you find useful. Let me see. Again, I'm looking for any questions. A lot of people talking about cleaning and tidying and so on. Maybe I should get a bit more stressed, and then I would clean and tidy more. Rochelle T says recovering from a narcissist takes a lot of work and determination to recover. It does. I'm not going to decorate that any or try to soften that any. It does, but it's worth it. I think when we put, if you think of all the energy we put into trying to manage someone and their behavior, when we start to put that same energy, well, even coming out of that, sometimes they still take up a lot of mental space in our head. They're still taking up a lot of our energy. We're trying to figure them out. We're trying to figure out, how did I end up there, and so on. When we take the same energy and we start to focus it maybe on ourselves and our moving forward and our own recovery and things like that, that same energy, yeah, it's priceless. It's worth it. You're not giving that energy to someone or some people that just don't deserve it. You're putting it where it belongs. You're putting it in your own well-being and your own future. So absolutely. Oh, come on. I'm trying to put up a new one here. Okay. What's pots and pans? I struggle allowing myself to do stuff on my want-to-do list. I haven't completed my entire should-do list. Okay. Okay. I thought there was a question there. Again, it comes down to intent. We fall into habits very, very quickly. And before you know it, we have a dozen things to do. And then something new comes along and we're telling ourselves, I can't do that because I've got so much to do. When in reality, we haven't done a damn thing. Okay. So maybe it is with intent, you pick one of those things and you focus on one of them. Now, it could be the easiest thing. It could be the priority. It could be, oh, it could be any of it. You just pick one thing and you focus on the one thing. Okay. Just keep going. And it's about doing it with intent, even if we're dragging our feet. Where we get to, you know, jumped all over the place. I have to move back. On my way says, I've yet to get back to mindfulness. A lot of people find mindfulness very helpful. Some people find it a difficult concept. They find it hard to focus on, you know, just whatever it is. What I often say to people is, if your mind wanders, well, that's what minds do. Our minds want. I can't keep my brain goes all over the bloody place. That's what our minds do. But we just find ways, and again, it comes with maybe practice. We find ways to gently bring our mind back to where it needs to be, to what it is we're focusing on, just in that moment. We're not pushing anything out of our head. We're not doing that. What we're doing is we're allowing it to go. We're just allowing it to pass. We might even say to ourselves, I'll give this a bit more thought when I'm finished doing this. Some people find, I would say, mindfulness exercises. They go to classes, there's groups of people doing it. Some people find exercises helpful. As I say, there's apps I think you can get for your phone. I can't remember their names at the moment. I think Headspace, I think, is one of them. I'm not sure. I think that even if we just get into a habit, and I've said this quite a few times, it's a good way to ground yourself as much as anything else. You just get into little habits where you start to remind yourself of what you're doing at the moment, whatever it is. Right now, I'm going to have a drink of my Coke. Right now, I'm going to check my emails. Right now, I'm vacuuming the stairs. You remind yourself of what you're doing at the moment. You just pepper your day with little things to remind yourself of what it is you're doing. You can remind yourself when something does come into your head. Right now, I happen to think. Right now, I have the thought. You acknowledge it for what it is. It's a thought. I'm not telling you that thought's not important because I don't have the right to say that. But what you can do is you can acknowledge it's a thought and then just go back to doing what you're doing. You can even agree with yourself, I will think about this when I'm finished doing this. You can even acknowledge your feelings. Right now, I happen to feel. I feel tired. I feel hungry. I feel fill in the blank. I feel anxious. I feel stressed. I feel uncertain. I feel threatened. Whatever it is, you acknowledge what it is you're feeling. But then you gently bring your mind back to focus on what it is you're doing. And what you might find over a period of time is as you practice doing that, things like mindfulness exercises where it might require focus and so on, starts to become a bit easier because again, you've got into that habit. So you've been rewiring those pathways to be able to concentrate. Okay. Oh, Shell says she started learning cooking new recipes. That's actually quite a good one. That's one that I did many years ago. I started to start cooking things I'd never cooked before, cooking them from scratch. I'm not saying I was good at it, but then I don't have to be. I was the only one eating it, so it doesn't really matter. Well, it's not true. I did experiment on my partner. I made her eat some of them. So yeah, practicing new things like cooking recipes, that can be a good one. There are different ways of cooking things, and there's different order to which you add the ingredients and so on, and you have to measure things out and all the rest of it. So yeah, there's quite a bit in that. So yeah, that's a really good suggestion. So thank you for that, Rochelle. Where did we get to? Where did we get to? Decluttering feels good. You're right, SH. Everyone's talking about clearing their houses out. That's pretty good. Yeah. There can be something quite cathartic about that as well, getting rid of stuff you don't need. When you start to declutter, we're starting to maybe emotionally declutter as well. Stuff in the house we no longer need. Oh, look, I've got a charger for a Nokia N10. That'll come in useful. Silly things like that. Where do we get to? Sandra says, I walk, do Duolingo, and learn Irish, and I do journal. In spite of my accent and in spite of where I live, I'm probably one of the few people in this country who can't speak Irish. I never really learned languages, and I had the opportunity when I was at school. You could have paid, you could have done French, German, Spanish, Irish. There's lots of different languages. And I must admit, it is something that I regret not doing. I should have learned a language. And Irish has become very popular in Ireland, of course it has. But not just what you'd say with the nationalist community, but even in the unionist community, a lot of people are learning Irish as well. It has become a very, very popular thing to do. It's something I regret not doing when I was younger, learning a different language. But yeah, learning a language is a good one. It challenges the brain. Yeah. Okay. Looking for questions. That wasn't a question, but I was looking for it. On my way again. Yeah, a huge part of rewiring for me is showing up here to learn from Darren. Thank you, Darren. Do you know what? I wouldn't even have considered that as being a way of rewiring your brain. So thank you for sharing that. I wouldn't even have thought of that. But that's good. If you are committed to doing something, and even if it's just listening to some Irish bloke waffle for an hour on a Sunday night, If you're learning something new from it, that's good. It's shown that you're doing something with intent. It shows that you're getting something from it. Otherwise you wouldn't keep coming back. So that's encouraging for me as well. So thank you for sharing that. Let me go. Let me see. Again, anybody with questions, if you put a question mark, I will see it a lot quicker and I won't have to read everybody's comment, because sometimes I feel like I'm reading a conversation between people and it's a bit nosy. So something voyeuristic about it. I don't really want to be doing that. Okay, where do we get to? This isn't a question, but it's a comment. Guilted every term. I'm a bookworm. Husband hated my reading. I hope you don't mind me sharing this, Jane, but I thought this is an interesting comment. Husband hated my reading, made him feel unloved. Not even 2 years I can't bring myself to read purely for enjoyment. I miss it so. First of all, what I would say is I'm just going to give a little bit of a gentle pushback on that, Jane. He didn't make you, if I can read this right, you didn't make him feel unloved. He told you that he felt unloved. You didn't make him feel anything. You could stick a pin in him. You'd feel that. You could tickle him. You would feel that. But you could not make him feel unloved. Some people will. Now, yes, I'm trying to put this into context. What you can't do is you can't throw a rock at someone and say, it wasn't me that hurt you, it was the rock. Okay, we can't do that. We'll have to take some kind of responsibility. Nor can we ever completely ignore someone and neglect them, what they think and what they feel and things like that. We can't do that either. That's not fair, because it is going to have an impact. But what we can't do is we can't take responsibility for how someone feels or what someone thinks, because we do something that we like that's not necessarily hurting anyone. And reading a book, let me put it to you this way, if you're reading a book, you're engaged in the book, you want to read. Now, let's imagine it's a story, it's a novel, okay? You are thinking about the characters, what they're going through, you're waiting to see how the story ends, you're engaged in it, so there's some kind of investment, you're reading through it. So you're not giving that person your attention, okay? Should you have to give someone 24 hours attention? Really? Okay. No. There's going to be times when you are engaged in other things. You can't be thinking about someone while you're at work, for instance. You can't be thinking about someone while you're driving a car in busy traffic. You're having to navigate the roads and stuff like that. It's only if you continually neglect someone, maybe then it's something to think about. But other than that, no. If he didn't feel loved, well, that's maybe because you were reading a book, by the way. That's maybe something he would need to address. You weren't doing that to him. That being said, I don't know the situation, but I'm just being very general, just based on what you're saying. If your passion is for books, I always like to quote Jay Reid. Start to live in defiance. Go get yourself a book. Pick a book. Maybe it's a book you read before, you want to read it again because you really enjoyed it. Maybe it's a different book by the same author. Go and get yourself a book and build a routine. You're going to read that book. Maybe it's going to be 1 chapter a day. Maybe it's going to be 10 pages a day, whatever it is. Go get that book and start reading. And by the time you have finished that book, go get yourself another one and do the same thing. Okay. You start to, again, one way of rewiring our brains is to start to do the things that we were told we shouldn't do, the things that we were told were a bad idea, the things we were told were wrong and neglectful and all the rest of it. No, we start to do those things. We start to cook from scratch. We start to learn that new language. We do things like that. Okay, where do we get to? I think I'm coming towards the end here because there's. Uh, yeah, because I'm seeing conversations, so that's pretty good. I like something. I'm not sure if I've said this to you before, but I do like that people interact on the chat and share ideas and stuff like that. I think that's kind of nice. There is something kind of encouraging about that. It is, I know they call it like an online community, and it is maybe something of an online community. Um, I think that's good. It's something that I know it's not something I do. It's not something I have. I wish I had the time to maybe moderate something and to do something a bit more online for people. Um, One of the things I looked at on YouTube, but I'm not sure. I'm really not sure what benefit it would be to people. There are things like channel memberships. A lot of channels do them, um, and they get different things out of the memberships. And it's something I had considered doing, something I could maybe spend a bit more time on. But I'm not sure if I would be able to do any more than I'm already doing at the moment with the live stream. So people would be getting that anyway. And other than if I do something and it's just going to be private and it's only for members, other than that, I'm not really sure. But other than that, I can't really think of a way of creating some kind of forum that would be well moderated where people could join it, learn from each other, get little tips from me and maybe other therapists and so on. But it is something I'd like to do. It's just I'm not sure how I could do it. Anyway. But yeah, as I say, I do like I do like the community aspect of this when people chat with each other. Um, and then he's asking, how can we overcome procrastination and falling back into previous patterns? Best way to break a bad habit is to form a new one. I don't know if you heard earlier on, but I was saying about the draw a line down the center of a page, write down everything that you're finding difficult about doing whatever you have to do, whatever all the obstacles are, but then just do it. And after that, write down what the real problems were. Start to do that. Start to learn those kind of things. If what you're doing is maybe a huge thing, it's maybe an ongoing thing, then it's maybe picking little parts of it, little pieces of it, little bits of it at a time. Sometimes we are doing something and we're dragging our feet doing it. But again, the more we do these things and the more we pay attention to what we get from it, the benefit, the outcome, the fact that there's now something less on our list to do, the more we do those things, the more we're building, forming that new neural pathway, if you will. Depending on your situation, depending on your environment, something that might be useful as well could be if you have someone that you trust, that you feel comfortable with, who is going to hold you to account. If you agree with them that you're going to do something and they're checking up with you, have you done it yet? Sometimes there's nothing more embarrassing than looking at our feet and going, no, I was going to, but little things like that can help. But the more you do it, we can slip back into our old ways very, very quickly, very easily, as I previously said. It really is about challenging that narrative of the short-term gratification, the short-term gratification of what do you call it, the quick dopamine hit, the path of least resistance. Let me see where we get to. Okay, I just jumped again. So, Angela tells me that an ISAC is an independent stalking advocacy caseworker. Okay, thank you for sharing with that. I wasn't sure of what the term was. I hadn't heard it before. So Thank you for sharing. Get to oh, here's a bit of advice from Michelle. One way to work on procrastination is to do something you don't want to do every day. This literally builds willpower. Yeah, it does. It builds a resilience to those things that you don't like as well. As I say, your tolerance for distress and discomfort starts to increase. Your comfort zone becomes wider. You start to become more confident and more resilient. So yeah, that's it. You know, pick something you don't want to do. That's a really good bit of advice. Thank you, Michelle. And let me see, I think we are coming towards the end. Yeah, I think we are. Witness to self. Oh, Lenny's asking, how do we deal with triggers and emotional dysregulation? Is that in front of others or from others? From others, it really depends on the situation. I think the best we do is we learn how to manage ourselves. Most we can ever do with other people is encourage them, motivate them, influence them, things like that. We can't manage their triggers for them. Our own emotional dysregulation in front of others, a lot of the time it comes through practice and perseverance. Things like, and this is where a therapist might help you to be able to help us to recognize and understand the things that trigger us in the first place. It could be things like uncertainty. It could be things like the fear of rejection. It could be things like conflict. It could be a lot of different things that trigger these things in us, but also to recognize what it is you're actually feeling, what's really coming up for you. Again, if we do not like how something feels, if we were put ourselves on a scale, it might be quite low. It's a 3, but the fact that we feel it at all, it might as well be a 10. Okay. So we learn to recognize what it is we're actually feeling in the first place. I feel uncertain. I feel threatened. I feel rejected. I feel this is really unfair. I feel a lack of control here. Whatever it is, recognizing those things can help us to regulate it. And what you might find is, again, things like the journaling can help. A therapist can help you with this. We can learn better ways, if you will, to respond to different people in different situations. If you find it helpful, if you go back through live streams, yes, it was a live stream, it wasn't videos. If you go back and search through my live streams, you will find I did a live stream specifically on emotional regulation, how to regulate our emotions, understand them, and regulate them. So if you have a look at that, you might find some useful little tips and things in there. Okay, we'll get to. I think something popped up there. It had something with a big Q on it, so that looked like a question, and I have to go back. Oh, here it was. There we go. Gabriella asks, my narc spouse questioned me a lot, accused me of hiding things when I had nothing to hide. I'm entering a new relationship now of love. How do I train myself not to over explain? It's interesting. This is something I actually made a video on. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 months ago. It's actually something recent. One of the impacts of coming out of abusive, coercive, different manipulative relationships is that need to over-explain ourselves. And again, it's about learning to rewire our brain. I think it's not that we don't need to give an explanation or we don't need to give an account sometimes. For instance, if someone says, do you want to go for coffee? Well, I can't because I'm getting my hair cut or something. That's giving an account. That's giving a reason. That's not giving an excuse. That's giving a reason, and that's giving an explanation. So it's not that we don't have to give an explanation, but you might have been in a situation with somebody who might have started asking you, why do you need your haircut? Who's cutting your hair? Why are you going to them? You know, so we end up constantly having to explain. What we do is we start to learn not to over explain. Sometimes we will give an explanation and we will leave it. Okay, we don't need to go any further. We don't over explain, we will give an account, and that's it. Okay, but that requires practice. Now, it doesn't mean someone might not ask for a little bit of clarity. That's fair enough. But what we're not doing is we're not trying to pacify someone. We're not trying to placate them. We're not trying to make someone who won't see reason, make them see reason. Okay, we're not doing that. Okay. Depending on the situation, on the conversation, depending on what it is, I think a good thing to do is sometimes just maybe ask a question back, but it's really just you're not trying to antagonize, you're not being passive aggressive, you're not being any of those things. What you're doing is you're looking for clarity. No, I can't go for the coffee, I'm getting my hair cut. Well, why are you getting your hair cut? Because it needs cut. You know, you don't need to say any more than that. You might ask a question like, well, why wouldn't I get it cut? Why wouldn't I get it cut on a Tuesday? You know, we just give them their own work to do. I think when you're dealing with very manipulative people that keep on badgering you with questions, just to give them their own work to do. We stop working for them. We stop trying to get them to see reason, and we just get them to do their own work. What would I do that for? Well, give me an example of when I've done that. Well, why is that important? We just keep asking questions like that. The person that you're with at the moment, if they're asking you a question, by all means answer it. But try to focus, try to stay a bit more present and pay attention to their answers. They might not be grilling you. They might not be interrogating you. They might accept your first answer. Okay, so recognize it's a habit that you've gotten into. Something you might find useful is to pay attention to other situations with other people where you don't necessarily over-explain. Okay, so pay attention to, I think the exceptions are always a good thing to do. Pay attention to the exceptions as well. To say we learn from positive experiences, but we tend to focus a lot on the negative ones. Right, there was another question that popped up. Sixth Sense Amelia, Discord or YouTube community page. I had a look at Discord because I've been on so many different social media channels just to try them out, just to see what they're like. Are they worth me trying to put out content on them or whatever? And I feel abysmal. I really don't know how they work. I tried Discord and I find Discord very hard to work because it's like each thing on Discord is its own little forum. I think I found it hard to get my head around. But other people use Discord. A lot of YouTubers use it. It's maybe something I'd have to know how it works, but also I would need to have a specific time to be able to do it. Okay. It is something I really would like to do, but it's trying to figure out the logistics and the best way of doing it. Where do we get to? Oh, something's up there. Do you know what it is? It's my connection. My connection's off. Yeah, I just noticed because I froze their screen for a moment. I'm doing it again. I've come to the end. I think I've answered most of the questions. Kimberly, hello, friends, and Darren, thanks for your good work here. You're welcome, Kimberly. It's nice to see you here, just as I unfortunately come to the end, but you can go back and watch from the beginning. So everybody, yeah, that's the idea of neuroplasticity. Again, it's often associated with young people because children learn as they're growing up, they learn a lot. But we still have it as we're older. It's just that sometimes as we get older, there has to be more intent behind it. Think about what I was saying about that CBT term, the behavioral activation. Whenever we start to do something, whenever we start to behave in a certain way, we do something with intent. The way we think and the way we feel, they start to catch up because thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are all linked. And it's something we have to do repetitively. It's something we have to do ongoing, not just whenever we remember or not just once or twice to see how it goes. We pick something and we do it with intent. When you find that beginning to work, what you might find is you start to practice, you start to do the same thing and maybe practice in other areas as well. And it doesn't have to be anything big. It could be something simple, like someone mentioned earlier, cooking. You start to cook different dishes. It could be learning an instrument. It could be learning a language. It could be learning a new skill. It could be whatever it is. Whenever, again, someone was mentioned about over-explaining, whenever we make a conscious effort to maybe give an account or give the explanation, but we don't go any further than that. And we start to look at those little things. We start to look at the outcome of those things, both positive and negative, because we have to learn from the positive as much as we learn from the negative. Some of those ideas from earlier, things like looking at our sleep patterns, our exercise, learning new skills, even just doing a jigsaw, a little crossword in the newspaper, whatever it is, we start to practice little things like that. We start to show a little bit of gratitude. We start to practice gratitude and things like that. The more we start to do these things, the more you will find your anxiety doesn't actually go away, but what it does is it dilutes, and you will find your anxiety only really comes up in situations that are anxiety provoking. We're not creating worst case scenarios. We're not in a constant state of alert. We will feel it maybe in a short burst and appropriate to that situation, and it will pass quite quickly. So that was this evening's live stream, looking at rewiring our brain, neuroplasticity. Next video coming out, I am looking at burnout, okay? Emotional burnout. Because we can get burnt out for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes it's work related, sometimes it's the environment we're in, sometimes it's our relationships. What I'm looking at are the not so much the red flags, but I'm looking at the little yellow flags, maybe the subtle warning signs that we could reach burnout. I'm going to look at what that is. I'm going to be looking at the impact that can have on us. I'm going to be looking at those subtle early warning signs. It could be a signal that we're going to end up emotionally burnt out, and looking at practical ways to avoid the burnout as well. So I will see you all. Thanks for joining me. I will see you all again next week. Again, yeah, haven't done this in a while. I will put it out there. Whatever topics you want me to cover, I'll pick one, and that's one I'll talk about. So again, thanks for joining me, everybody. Take care, everyone. Bye now.